My guest today is GK, an AI consultant, former Amazon senior PM, and Maven instructor whose course drew over 15,000 registrants. She built AI agents to manage her own neurodivergence and is running 3 businesses simultaneously. One of them, a specialty coffee company powered by AI. We are going to talk about why vibe coding alone won't give you quality, what spec engineering actually looks like in practice, and why the smartest person in the AI room isn't the one with the latest model, it's the one who can make machines think. GK, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lena. Happy to be here and super excited for your new initiative. You've done a great job already and I'm
Thanks.
excited for you.
Thank you so much, GK. Before we get into hard stuff, I want to understand how you got here. You have done so many things. Tell our listeners about your career arc. What are 5 careers you have compressed in one person?
I don't know if I can take so much credit for it. I think a lot of it happened on it, but obviously lots of hard work and, fighting uncertainties and so on. I think the key string in all of it was right from the time I started my career in marketing to all the circus I'm running now with AI and coffee and so on and so forth is I'm a bit relentless when I pick up something. And I never thought of myself as too inexperienced or over experienced for any job. So if it was in front of me and aligned with my gut feeling, I would just go for it. So when I finished my engineering, computer science engineering, and went into marketing, people were like, "No, this is such a bad move." And I was like, "No, I eventually want to get into business. Maybe it's the right thing to do." So it just continues, I guess.
You wrote something recently wonderful that AI amplifies cognitive profiles that corporate performance management spent years penalizing. Did you have that framing before AI, or did tools make it more visible?
That's actually a really interesting topic that I've been researching so much on recently. I felt it from day one when I started using ChatGPT. It felt like a double edged sword where it can either amplify the cognitive load or actually help if you knew how to handle with it. That is a big, big if. And I also noticed a lot of people don't really talk about it. I mean, there are studies and surveys that are done where researchers found how AI is helping or not helping people with neurodivergence, for example. So that's still there, but it's not like really a topic that people care about yet because everybody's on the productivity machine, I guess. What I feel is needed though in the industry at the minute, or product management, AI overall, and its adoption. One, in the corporate world, performance reviews meant something in terms of how people can perform on a linear scale, on a linear graph, how it compounded towards the P&L, which is still going to be ultimately it's called bottom line for a reason, right? But the way it was measured was always on a linear scale, and a lot of things were binary, and you had to go quarter on quarter or year on year, whereas now it's a question of you can have a breakthrough this week or the next month, and you don't need a 3-month onboarding to hit the ground running. You're expected to have hit the ground before coming before running with the company. So things like this can change the whole hiring process. Of course, people have already seen it, but also performance reviews, and that means not just producing an employee's synthesizing an employee's performance and outputs and KPIs through an agent versus actually looking at how was their, peaks and troughs, how are their cognitive load, the mental load on working with AI versus the actual outcome. And from that output, how did the business really benefit? Not just in terms of directly and immediately measurable results. It also has to do with it's a lot about ideas these days, right? There's that one idea that might change the whole trajectory of a company these days. So it's going to be a lot of unconventional measurements. That's where I think good companies are going to head.
Being neurodivergent, I've seen, like with AI particularly, are you seeing any tensions between old version of yourself versus new version? How you are keeping up with it?
This is a really interesting question because I've seen both, to be honest. And so, yes, I am part of the neurodivergent community. Just so I'm very, very clear about it. So I'm not trying to come from the outside and poke the bear or just give advice. I've lived through it, so I can say I feel like with anything that you struggle with in life, right? You can always look at the situation in two angles. One, you are the victim of the situation, and the other, you are the fighter of the situation. Literally, like nothing else changes about the situation itself. The only thing that you can potentially change is the way you look at it. And I heard this from someone who was a Holocaust survivor, and it felt like if a Holocaust survivor can say that, I think it's possible for me to take that lens too. It's really difficult to practice 100%. So I tried to look at the AI wave through that lens, and I was like, yes, I can be washed by it. I can let myself be the, sufferer of it and say, okay, AI is taking over my job, or my performance is going to be, be bad, and, all sorts of things like that. Or turn it around saying, no, I'm gonna, stand tall in it. And that means in what ways can I use AI to my advantage? So say, for example, if I were to be the victim of it, I could very well go to it for mental health advice, for example, or make AI part of my world and then, let it get into my head versus, wait, let me try and make it my servant than my master, and make it my project manager, make it my reading partner, make it someone who can challenge me when I go into, hundreds of tasks at a time. I've been able to do all of these things through all my agentic exercises, let's say. I've got agents controlling every aspects of my way of thinking or my way of operating. So say, for instance, I start a Monday morning and I lost track of something that I thought was important 2 weeks ago. This project manager prompts me saying, hey, I know you're busy with this now, but 2 weeks ago you shelved this project and you were supposed to pick it up, or you wanted to make sure this particular customer was prioritized. You wanted to have a one-to-one or a coffee chat. You shelved it 2 weeks ago. Do you want to take it up? So things like this is just one example, but things like this make me not wake up thinking, oh, what happened to the coffee chat? I'm just wanting to do that and not done it. And then goes to, oh, I wanted to do B, I wanted to do C. And then the overwhelm starts and you're already getting out of bed with exhaustion. I've heard from so many people, especially the ones who work with AI. So that's one of the things that I was able to get on top of, which I was not able to do with so many Asanas and, Trellos and Atlassians. They're great tools, and no doubt. But even to manage an Atlassian, I had to take the initiative. Whereas the one time I sat down with my agents and put this into a structure, it started, acting on its own. And, even if I didn't go and give it an update, it'll prompt me back. So things like this really helped. And another benefit I've got out of it is I started understanding the difference between getting sucked into it fully while working with AI versus keeping it focused one window at a time, one master agent at a time. So what I mean is, for example, at the start, I used to, especially when the cloud code was getting interesting for me, I was just firing so many chats in parallel. And obviously, I was also conscious at the back of my head saying, oh, I need the output, but I also want to be conservative with my tokens and the environment. And I also want to get this done. And I also want to launch the third business that I wanted to experiment. So there's a background mental exhaustion as well happening, right? And for this, again, I started turning it into a benefit where you do one task at a time, one conversation at a time, go deep into it, spend your first 4 hours on it, and then go to the next window. So like consciously, I question myself from time to time saying, how many tasks do I have running at the same time? And it's a lot of it is not popular advice. Like people say, no, I wake up with 4 agents running these tasks for me and all of that, which is great. Let them do it. But where you are actively engaged, I think that has so much cognitive load.
Says, what are your next plans?
Sure. I'm still discovering my plans, and they keep changing a lot, which is exciting as well. I have launched the specialty coffee business. It's been in the baking in the oven for like 4 months now, but a lot of it was possible because of AI as well. The only parts I couldn't speed up were the uncertainties in the outside world. So that's been great. And when I first started and I was not even that confident with AI helping me, I was like, okay, this is probably going to take a year and I have to wait for the next harvest. So that's shaping well. And the coffee has been really, really good so far. The roast process and the output. I didn't want to believe it until I saw it. So it's great now. And then the second thing I'm working on is my content that I create for people. I've been obsessing about the value that it adds and not as a noise in the prompt hack content world. Simply put, because I don't think I'm cut out for it as well. I can't keep up with so much. So I'm really focusing on topics that people want to hear about, people want me to research on, and take lessons on. So that's something I'm really invested in. And the third thing, the brainchild of a lot of this is the workflow automation studio that we have. We've been having small and big successes with all the builds we've done, and that feeds into my content, that feeds into my coffee business. We are learning a lot through live builds, and it's a two pizza team. It's just me and my business partner who's an engineer, and I learn so much from it every week. So it'll be exciting to see how we're able to scale that, and then how the value is actually perceived. We want to see how it helps us scale and compound as well. It's a two pizza team, and it's only me and my business partner. So the learning is pretty fast, and the customer that we've got for the live POC is also great. So it's exciting to see what's coming.
Let's get into heart of it. I know you teach a lot of Maven courses as well. I want to learn a bit more about the first topic you mentioned, particularly where you said we can build agent, we can build skills to help offload some of these cognitive ability. I want to learn it. If you can give some kickstart approaches on how to do it for people who have not done it and want to get how to do it.
Sure. So there's loads and loads of hacks, right, to get around this. I wish there was a channel to talk about neurodivergence and AI and prompt hacks exclusively for it. I'm sure there's something on Substack or somewhere. But one of the hacks that I use, for example, is I've set a global rule on my Claude that it has to always use ask user questions every time I want to brainstorm or even at the start of a task, new chat or wherever it is. I have pushed it to ask me questions, challenge me, and look around corners in terms of am I thinking through the right lens or am I rushing to the conclusion? Because that's one of the things about, how each one's personality is, right? My personality or my pattern is my brain can run at 100 miles per hour, depending on the time or day or mood I am in. So I've set that as an explicit rule. And then you can actually engineer it more. I haven't, where you can explain your entire personality to it without getting into the emotional parts, because that's where the master servant equation changes. Giving it objective info saying, hey, I can be on 3 different modes. And if I'm in mode A, my prompt will look bigger or I will be dumping a lot of ideas. So that's when you have to take the opposite role and then you pause and ask me questions like this. And in times where I've not given you, when I've given you too much context, then again, you slow down, you go on to mode B and then ask me questions again and, change. Basically, you're putting a middle ground and then force it to not go into any of the extremities. So that way, a non-deterministic AI can actually act more deterministic and pull you into, acting in moderation, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Let's switch gears a bit. You have been emphatic about this. You can't wipe code your way to quality. And you introduce these terms about spec engineering as the missing work in AI native terms. What does spec engineering for an agentic system actually look like? Not in principle, but in practice. Walk me through what you actually do.
I ran a few surveys with my audience and they shared some useful insights. PMs today are already writing PRDs with AI. That's not a problem. And they are able to spin prototypes with vibe coding tools like Lovable and Replit and even Cloud Code. And the models are also becoming so much better at, getting a vague prompt and spinning an app on their own. And they've already done a lot of the heavy lifting that the users have to do in terms of deploying agents and multi-agent based building. For example, one of the superpowers I think Claude launched was about the different steps of building through specs. So technically, spec engineering has already been initiated at the model level. But what happens at the user level is we think everything is down to vibe coding. So I just give a prompt and the model will always know how to build, and I'm going to, start spinning cool apps, and it's actually cool what people are able to do with it, no doubt about it. But then the reality is a big chunk of this is always been on or so far been on side projects or internal facing apps and projects that the organization doesn't even give you, that doesn't even care about much really. So it's as if the trust level on agents is low, but the excitement about vibe coding is great. So that already says something about us, right? The interesting thing about humans is we have this dichotomy between trusting and getting excited, which means you have to do something in terms of your own level of ownership in getting it right. So, in simple terms, it's about being able to trust the agents and also making sure it has the right set of input so that it is trustable. So, it's like a vicious cycle. So, in practical terms, how this would look like is instead of saying, hey, build me a habit tracker app, this is what I spoke about in my last lightning lesson on Maven. And it was so easy to spin up an app and it just came up with cool features, so on and so forth. But the minute I started adding more features, more layers, and trying to make it more optimized, it burned through a lot of my tokens. It got complicated in the kind of changes I was trying to make or the iterations I was trying to build on. Whereas the minute you put a spec in place, where you have 4 different explicit sections. The first one is you start from a customer failure or a customer need. That's your entire point about working backwards as well, right? So you start from there and clearly define it. Spend as many hours as you want to or have to on that one paragraph or one line alone. And then go into the building blocks of the spec itself, where you then give the constraints of where it needs, the environment where it needs to operate, the tech stack or the APIs and so on and so forth. And then you go into what the build itself will look like in terms of the features, capabilities, and so on and so forth. And then in the end, you give the failure modes or the edge cases that it shouldn't get confused about. You resolve all the ambiguities about it. So in effect, what you've done is in a spec, you've already played the role of a PM through the first section. Then you're acting as the engineer or the builder who defines all the features, and then you brought in the designer who decides how this is going to look in terms of the whole app's outfit, let's say. And then on the third stage, you're already bringing in the architect who is going to define where what lies and so on and so forth. And then the end role is the role of a QA, and it's never been more important to have a better QA than now. So you've got all these people's roles already being played within one artifact, one input, let's say, that you give to the agents, and the agents pick them apart and bring you tasks and say, hey, the minute you said this is a sprint contract, which is what it is called, which is what Anthropic even calls it as. And then it picks apart the different tasks from the whole contract. What it means is, okay, you said you wanted feature A, B, and C, and you're going to operate on tech stack with API 1, 2, and 3. Then it deploys these tasks in a way where it says the first task is going to be spreading the base layer. Then the second task is going to be adding feature 1, 2, and 1, 2, and 3. The third task is going to be about where it's going to be the host aspect, the launch aspect, let's say. So it basically breaks it down to multiple tasks, and each task will be picked up by an agent or a sub agent, let's say. Then you've got all these sub agents working like in mini swarms, and then you've got an agent factory overall. The beauty of this is it's not just that each agent is so scoped and well defined in what it must do, but it's so interesting to see when you want to come in and say, hey, I want to go into that feature 2.8 I spoke about and I want to make this change. It knows exactly where to go into, right? Whereas on vibe coded app, if you've vibe coded, you might picture this already in your head. You would give a change like that, and it would go through the entire code base and hide some features, hide some code, or get confused and go into spirals, and that feels like a psychosis on its own. So these are the features of building with specs. And one of the things that I was able to read between the lines when Anthropic was promoting this as a solution was, if you notice, they launched Mythos, their latest model, and they immediately they tested it, and then they immediately sort of took a step back and be like, no, we're not going to get this out for the outside world. They have a select bunch of customers to use it. And then they bring this context engineering, context anxiety, sprint contract, spec-based building, and all of these experiments out. Somehow, if you connect these dots, it's all down to costs and making the barrier visible. In plain terms, it's like you've got to a point where you're fascinated by the models, and the model players know that. So they no longer have to impress you. They need to manage your expectations. So when they say we're coming up with the next model, but we're not going to release for you, so we are actually capable of doing stuff, but you have to take stock of things and probably manage your context windows better, probably optimize your own agent's performance. And this is how we did it through spec engineering. So this is a very interesting play of how they're managing costs and they're managing our expectations as well. And the second aspect I told you was about keeping that barrier, right? Anthropic had this interesting model of building this whole few $100 billion business through a terminal app. The last time I used terminal was probably in my, not in engineering, like in my high school computer science. So it's so interesting to see how they have turned the tables around lowering the barrier versus raising the barrier, and that way people realize the importance of they get to the value realization quicker than than it usually is. So I think it's a combination of business model and how you perform better with agents as well, if that makes sense.
Totally does. And I'm curious.
That was a very long explanation of saying it, but yeah.
That was so thorough. I'm just curious, like, how do you evolve the specs or system to continuously learn or change with the needs? Because the things I'm looking for right now today, it changes even like 4 hours later in the day. How do I make it updated or continuously learn from those changes around and keep the cost low, as you were saying?
That's the other thing, right? When you say manage expectations, I mean, manage user expectations, it says something really, really crucial that most people are missing out. It's not just to say, hey, we're going to raise the costs. It's going to be a play out of who's the smartest person in the room. Not by knowing what's the latest update and prompt hack, but who can actually make a machine work like a machine and put human creativity into it rather than saying, I've got the latest model and the latest hack, and I can produce an app in 10 seconds compared to 10 minutes versus another person in the room saying, I've taken 20 minutes to build this app, but it has got A, B, and C kind of thinking. And this is how it's going to benefit for the user. This is how you can challenge its behavior. This is where you can put guardrails on its behavior, and so on and so forth. So that person B is the one that is going to stand out. I, for one, can say, being somebody who consumes content and also creates content around the AI, and I might be shooting on my feet here, but I can say for a fact that overconsumption of content doesn't mean you're going to perform better. That's a really, really, really big point that I want to. If there was one point in this entire podcast that people should take away, this is what I would tell people. It's like, it's not just to say it's because of the dopamine or it's too much. Less is more and all of that. Yeah, those are fundamentals, but it's also much deeper in the sense that the more time you give yourself to not consume, but to actually think, the better your AI output is going to be. So just because I have subscribed to 100 Substacks and 50 podcasts and so on and so forth, newsletters and everything, it keeps me up to date, but I don't think on my feet. So, but whereas the market is going to reward people who are going to think on their feet. Even when people think on their feet, for example, they get so excited about putting content out on their own and then, capturing the buzz and so on and so forth. I would say there again, if your goal is to create content and help people, go for it. But if it's because you got excited about the product and you want to showcase your work, it has to be somewhat scoped to a level of what's your outcome, or I mean, what's the goal and what is the outcome you're aiming for. Because there again, the noise reduction will matter. What you convey is going to matter. And a lot of what you just put out there might not even get you anywhere, if that makes sense. Like, just because you've consumed so much information and you've been able to put it out on a series of posts, it could help your job, for your visibility, and so on and so forth. But ultimately, they're going to start testing you on your real work. So instead, if you can reserve that energy, mental load, like every post, every pixels, every, like, pixelage, let's say, that you spend your effort on is sucking away some of your creative space. So be very, very clear about your goals and work backwards from it. If you're working as a full-time PM and if you want to showcase your work, just showcase your product or your output or your project. And that's it. The more you go into the decorative elements, it's going to be great. You can get a few likes, but in your actual full-time job, maybe not. Like, or if you're going to switch to a new job, they probably would care more about what you committed on Git and how it actually works, how you've thought through it, and why is your habit tracker app different from somebody else's. So that just because AI has made it easy to post and create content, I wouldn't recommend consuming it all or creating it all, if that makes sense.
I totally get it. As a content creator myself, I so much resonated with what you said there. I'm curious, you also wrote in one of your posts, you surveyed for 600 PMs before creating your first Maven lecture. Can you tell our users more about it?
Yeah, sure. So the stark, but obviously not so surprising insight from that survey was more than 80% of the people thought they were going to be outpaced by AI, or they were fearing irrelevance. They didn't want to be left out in the AI PM race, which is totally understandable. I completely empathize with it, and I've been there too. But I think what's underlying that is also connected to what I just said about consumption, right? A lot of what this wave is doing to us is create a sense of FOMO and then get something out of it. Whoever's benefiting from this model, right? It could be right from the model players or the content creators, right? Every one of them have their own mission, have their own objectives, and so on and so forth. If you're cognizant of what your goal is when you're on a medium, I think that puts a lot of this insecurity to rest, and you will start focusing on what is it that will make you feel relevant or make you feel, not even feel, make you seen by people who are using your products, people who are employing you. I think that's where the real key is. There's going to be a massive, massive shift in how the PM workforce is employed. People keep thinking that a lot of the PMs are going to be made redundant or AI is taking PMs' jobs. And then eventually the cycle will end and we can re enter the market. These three things are partially true, but the reality is yes, the PMs are going to get made redundant. Yes, more PMs are going to be, more or less PMs, we don't know, are going to be rehired. But the difference between the first cohort and the second cohort is they may or may not shed workforce with strong rationale. It's probably down to the business's performance. And if the business doesn't perform well, even if you're a good PM, you might, have to face the reality. But making into that second cohort means what's the differentiator you have actually created? Now, this really settles the fear of irrelevance. Focusing on what value are you actually creating rather than what you can put on your CV, what you can put on your LinkedIn. Again, all of these are important, no doubt about it. But ultimately, what makes your product stand out, what makes your workflow stand out, how you are able to collaborate between AI and humans in the sanest way possible, that's going to make a big difference. And I think that's the one thing I would tell the people who responded to my survey. But there were other interesting insights that I got from the survey as well. One of them was half the people said they want to collaborate better with their engineering teams. Then there was another survey I sent out for my second lightning lesson where people said a lot of the times we generate a PRD, do the customer research, and so on and so forth, with or without AI. But then engineers are at a completely different pace. They are outpacing us by the time we produce the first customer research. And then the third thing is we already know what we want, but it doesn't really get translated into the final output. So I think these already settle the question of, again, what is your differentiator, right? Basically, they answered their own problems in some ways. So unpacking each of these and then answering from your own worldview, your own product thinking will make a huge difference here.
One thing I ask every guest at end, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing before you ship your first AI system into real world, not a framework, not a process, just one thing, what would it be?
I would tell myself that the demo proving something works is not the same as knowing what it breaks. During build, we sort of went into the AI taking the lead in terms of showing us this is how you get to the next step versus us going back to the drawing board from time to time and saying, you know what, we had this insight going on. Let's iterate on the insights and on the build at the same time and then keep them osmotic. That's what I think I would have told myself before our first ever workflow. Now our workflow automation looks very different. We do this check-in like literally every single push or every single update we see. There's no grand wait or trying to perfect the product and so on and so forth. And this was even true before AI as well. Like there's this philosophy of fail fast and so on and so forth. But fail fast in the world of building with AI also means that you accept your failure, you accept your learnings, and then say, hey, feature one, we tried to launch it with a perfect PRD, didn't come out well, so back to drawing board instead of actually conceding to AI and be like, oh no, this is not the feature I expected, versus stopping and coming back and talking to your humans and, getting the insight, going back and, keeping these two loops active.
This has been exactly kind of conversation I wanted to have. Thank you. Thank you for not softening for any of it. Thank you for coming to our show. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to you.
Thank you so much, Lena. And I'm so glad that you're doing a podcast where people can share their spiky PO hobbies, as Maven would call it. And I wish you the best. And hopefully, the listeners from this session got something out of it.
Thank you. 3 things I'm taking away from this conversation. 1. Make AI your servant, not your master. Set the rules once and let it work for your brain, not against it. 2. A demo proving something works is not same as knowing what it breaks. Go back to human. Keep both loops active. 3. Stop consuming. Start thinking. The market will reward the person who think on their feet, not the one with the most substacks in their inbox. If any of that landed, send this episode to one person who needs to hear it. This is Agentic AI Execution. Until next time, stay curious, keep building, and bring someone along for the ride.